The Mafia boss's fiancé forgot to hang up, and he heard her threaten a 9-year-old boy. Dominic Varelli sat silently inside a black SUV as Vivian ordered his mother's caregiver to fake a blessing for their marriage. When Marin refused, Vivian described her son's blue backpack, red inhaler, and the exact school gate where he waited alone. Dominic didn't interrupt. He recorded every word, sent armed men to secure the child, and drove home through the storm. Vivian still believed she was becoming his wife the following night. Vivian Marrow forgot to hang up at 4:17 on a Thursday afternoon. That was the slip that destroyed her. Not the diamonds she wore to hide her hunger, not that rehearsed angelic smile, not the ivory dress hanging in the East Suite like a promise of power. The act might have fooled his family, the staff, and the papers eager to crown her the future Mrs. Varelli. But the line stayed open. On the other end, Dominic Varelli just listened. He sat in the back of a black SUV by Newport Harbor, face completely blank, hand perfectly still on his knee while rain streaked the tinted glass like silver veins. His men kept entirely quiet. Nobody spoke when Dominic focused like that. No one dared breathe heavy around a mob boss, whose silence usually meant someone was about to die. Through the speaker. Vivian's tone suddenly shifted. Minutes earlier, she had played the sweet fiancé. She had told him his mother was resting, that Marin was with her, that tomorrow night would be perfect. Then came a soft click, the careless slap of a phone onto a table. Vivian assumed the call was over. It wasn't. Dominic heard a door shut, the rustle of heavy silk, the low hum of his mother's oxygen machine. Then came another voice, Marin Hayes, his mother's caregiver, quiet but unbending. She flatly refused to lie for her. For the first time all afternoon, Dominic finally shifted, his eyes lifted. Over the speaker, Vivian laughed an ugly, hollow sound. She told Marin that tomorrow night, when Dominic asked for his mother's blessing, Marin would translate Isabella's silence as a yes. Marin shot back that Isabella didn't accept her. Vivian's voice turned sharp enough to cut glass. She said Marin was the old woman's voice, so she would make her say yes. A heavy pause. Dominic could almost picture the scene back at the estate, his mother by the arched window staring out at the gray Atlantic, silver hair pinned low, writing board resting on her lap, her tired hands shaking with pure fury because she was trapped. He pictured Marin standing beside her in that plain navy uniform, body rigid with fear, dark curls falling loose. Then Vivian dropped the threat that turned the air inside the SUV lethal. She told Marin to cooperate, unless she wanted her son to vanish from school tomorrow. A guard glanced back. Dominic didn't blink. His stare stayed locked on the phone. Vivian kept going. Her voice softened, almost amused. She listed his blue backpack and the red inhaler. She knew he waited by the side gate. Children are easy to grab when their mothers are predictable, she taunted. A small sound broke over the line. Not a scream. Marin never screamed. Dominic already knew that about her. She swallowed her pain before it ever became noise. She understood that surviving meant starving cruel people of the satisfaction of a reaction. But he heard her breath hitch. At that sound, something inside Dominic went completely still, a dead calm that terrified the men in the car far more than his anger ever could. Vivian kept pressing. Vivian laid out the trap. If Marin spoke up, Vivian would claim the lonely caregiver was planting fears in Isabella's head just to feel important. She reminded Marin that Dominic would believe his bride over a hired nurse with bills. Over the line. Marin whispered that Vivian didn't know him. Vivian just scoffed, "Neither do you." Then came a sharp clatter. Dominic recognized the sound instantly. Someone snatching away his mother's writing board. Vivian's tone turned openly cruel. She told the old woman there would be no more little warnings. She demanded Marin's obedience for tomorrow. The heavy silence that followed was thick with absolute ruin. Then suddenly, Vivian gasped. A second later, he heard her breathe his name in panic. Dominic cut the line. The screen went black. For a long moment, nobody in the vehicle moved a muscle. Outside, harbor lights bled through the fog. A yacht bell clanged in the distance. Newport looked deeply peaceful in this weather, old money, sleeping safely behind iron gates. Grand cliffside mansions, glowing against the storm. But beneath that polished surface, Dominic's entire empire had just cracked. His future wife had threatened a kid. His mother was held hostage by her own silence inside his home. And Marin Hayes had stood between them, entirely alone. Dominic simply handed the phone to Carlo. His oldest enforcer took it. Dominic spoke quietly. Eli, 9 years old, student at the academy. Blue backpack, asthma meds. Carlo's expression hardened. Dominic ordered him to hit the school before Maro's crew arrived. No panic, nobody touches the kid. Carlo bailed out before the sentence ended. Dominic looked at the driver. Back to the estate. The heavy vehicle ripped away from the curb. Only then did the syndicate boss look out at the rain again. His reflection stared back from the tinted glass. Sharp suit, dead eyes, a tightly controlled jaw. The kind of face rivals dreaded, because it gave absolutely nothing away. But beneath that icy stillness, something ancient and violent ripped open inside him. He had built an absolute fortress around his mother, after the hit that stole her voice, filled the estate with armed men, doctors, cameras, and expensive silence. He actually thought money could buy safety. Yet a woman wearing his diamond had slipped right past it all. Worse. She got close because Dominic had trusted a pretty face when he should have trusted his gut. As they climbed the private road to the Varelli estate, the sky turned pitch black. The mansion loomed above the rocks like a fortress built for secrets. Tall columns, iron gates, and violent rain lashing the jagged shore far below. It was the kind of compound tourists photographed from boats and whispered about in town. A place nobody entered without Dominic's blessing. Marin Hayes had walked through the servants' gate 6 months ago, holding a cheap purse, wearing tired eyes, and gripping a perfectly folded resume. She looked like a ghost among the elite. That was exactly why he remembered her. Their very first morning, she stood outside his mother's suite, balancing a teacup and an alphabet board. She was a softer woman with warm eyes that dodged his at first, but when she realized looking away made her seem weak, she forced her chin up to meet his stare. Most people shrank around the boss. Marin looked genuinely terrified. Terrified, yes, but not hollow. Isabella Virelli sat by the window watching them. Dominic asked if the new girl understood his mother. The housekeeper claimed she did. Marin lifted her chin and corrected them right there. She didn't claim to understand the older woman. She was simply learning how she chose to speak. The room went totally silent. A maid stared at the floorboards. One enforcer shifted his weight, waiting to see if the nurse had just gotten herself fired. Dominic studied Marin for a long second. Then his mother tapped twice against her chair. Yes, that settled it after that. Marin was the only soul Isabella consistently allowed near her. Marin learned the code: 2 taps for yes, 1 for no. Touching the silver cross at Isabella's throat meant somebody was lying. A closed fist signaled pain. Eyes darting toward the door meant get out. A slow blink meant a memory had surfaced. A hand flat on the blanket meant pure exhaustion. Dominic watched Marin decode his mother's language with incredible patience. She never rushed the old woman, never talked over her, never treated her silence like an empty room. And the crime boss, who controlled entire rooms with a whisper, realized he had completely failed the only silence that actually mattered. At first he convinced himself his interest was purely tactical. She kept his mother calm, making her a vital asset. But then he started catching tiny details. The way she wore the same scuffed black shoes, packing cheap lunches wrapped in rubber bands, giving his mother these soft, totally exhausted smiles. And how that smile vanished the second she hit the hallway. She never accepted extra food from the kitchen, unless they forced leftovers on her for Eli. Her son, Dominic, knew about the kid. Marin kept her own life buried, but lit up when Isabella asked about Eli. 9 years old, bad asthma, obsessed with ocean documentaries, hated onions, asked way too many questions. He called the estate the castle where nobody laughs. Dominic almost cracked a smile at that one. Almost. Then Vivian Morrow showed up. She was the kind of underworld royalty men, confused with destiny, a woman who walked into rooms like she owned the air. Her syndicate hid behind fine art. Her father owned the ports. Her uncle bought judges. Her cousins ran men who wore heavy gloves for reasons polite society ignored. Marrying Vivian Morrow meant uniting 2 families that had traded bullets for 20 years. It would end a war. It would lock down the harbor. The union was supposed to make every rival in Rhode Island hesitate before crossing either family. That was the street logic. Dominic was too seasoned to believe in permanent peace. Even so, he agreed to the engagement. His empire was exhausted. His soldiers were restless. And his mother had been locked in her silence for far too long. He convinced himself this marriage was pure strategy. Vivian was stunning, educated, completely composed and useful. She never begged him for tenderness. She thrived on the power alone. And when she kissed Isabella on the cheek, calling her Mama Isabella right in front of him, Dominic allowed himself the most dangerous luxury of all. Relief. He just wanted a quiet house. He wanted to believe a woman could sit beside his mother, without turning into a threat he would eventually have to destroy. But Isabella never touched Vivian willingly. Dominic noticed it far too late. Marin caught it on day one, and Vivian caught Marin watching. That was the exact moment the silent war started. It did not begin with screaming or open threats. It started with tiny calculated cruelties. Vivian would shift a water glass 2 inches beyond Isabella's reach. She would casually ask Marin in crowded rooms if women of her size fatigued faster. She would stroke Dominic's arm right, as Marin translated Isabella's rejections. Just a subtle physical claim to remind everyone in the room who wore the heavy diamond. The second Dominic left, Vivian dropped her smile like a cheap theater mask. "You are very devoted," she told Marin once, while Isabella sat rigid by the fire. Marin calmly folded a blanket, replying that Isabella deserved devotion. "She is cared for," Vivian corrected, noting the difference. Her gaze turned icy careful in houses like this. Women who feel morally superior usually find out they are just replaceable. Marin swallowed the bait and stayed silent. She learned a long time ago that answering back rarely wins the fight. Her life before the Varley estate was smaller, harder. She grew up above her aunt's laundromat in Fall River, Massachusetts. The winter pipes always rattled, and the cash always dried up long before the month ended. Her mother scrubbed office floors on the night shift. Her father walked out when Marin was 12, only showing his face twice after that, first to beg for cash, then to steal a car he never returned. By 25, Marin built a quiet existence on ordinary sacrifices. She pulled shifts at an elder care center and split a tiny apartment with her younger sister, Leia. She was even engaged to a guy named Andrew. He loved her softness right up until it inconvenienced him, loved her kindness until it required him to step up. Then Leia died on a slick highway outside Providence. She left behind a dark-haired baby boy with lungs too weak for the cold. Everyone suddenly had advice. Her fiancé suggested they could just send money from a distance. His mother warned that a kid would wreck her body, her freedom, and any chance at marriage. A social worker pushed her to consider foster placements. Marin just packed Eli up and took him home. Andrew walked out, she cried exactly once, sitting on the bathroom tiles while Eli slept in a towel-lined laundry basket, waiting for her next paycheck to buy a crib. Then she washed her face, heated up a bottle, and became a mother, without asking anyone for permission. From that night on, she measured love purely by what it cost. If a guy wanted her but rejected Eli, he was chasing the wrong girl. If a job paid well but treated her like garbage, she banked the rent money and walked away the next morning. If people judged her clothes or her exhausted eyes, she let them talk. Buying Eli's inhalers mattered a hell of a lot more than strangers' opinions. The Varley estate paid triple what the nursing homes did, so she stayed. She ignored the intimidating iron gates. She ignored the heavy stares of armed guards. Even when Dominic Varley's sheer gravity sucked the air out of the hallways, she stayed for Eli. Then Vivian uncovered her secret. The first black sedan parked outside St. First on a Tuesday afternoon. Marin spotted it instantly while picking Eli up. A matte black ride with Rhode Island tags. A guy in dark shade sat behind the wheel under a gray sky. He watched the schoolyard with the lazy, terrifying patience of a paid hitter. Marin gripped Eli's hand so hard he whined. "Sorry, baby," she told him. He asked if she was mad. She said no, her first lie. By Thursday, the sedan had stalked the school twice more. By Thursday afternoon, Vivian casually dropped Eli's name in conversation. Now, as Dominic strode through the mansion doors, Marin hid upstairs in Isabella's room, fighting intense tremors. Vivian had left 20 minutes prior after realizing Dominic was called. She did not scream. The silence terrified Marin. People scream when they panic. They go quiet when they plan a hit. Isabella sat by the heavy drapes, her writing board resting on her lap. Her frail fingers shook as she spelled out one name. Eli. Marin dropped to her knees. Whispering, she did not know what to do. Isabella's expression morphed into a raw, pure rage that seemed to fuel her broken body. She knocked a knuckle against the board. "No, I know." Marin's voice shattered. She confessed she should have warned Dominic. Isabella raised a shaking hand, resting it gently against Marin's cheek. Then she dragged the pen across the board. Good mother afraid. Marin clamped a hand over her mouth. She had spent days hating her own terror, convinced that scared women were weak women. But Isabella survived the kind of brutal mob violence that rips the voice straight from the throat. She understood the truth. Fear was not failure. Fear was just the body trying to keep love breathing. A hard knock hit the door. Marin shot to her feet. Dominic walked in with zero security detail. That alone made her stomach drop. He always visited his mother alone. But tonight he did not look like a devoted son. He looked like a hurricane wearing a tailored suit. His black overcoat dripped with rain. His dark hair was soaked. His features were so dead. Calm it physically dropped the temperature in the room. Isabella locked eyes with him. Dominic stopped dead in the middle of the floor. Total silence. Then he slowly knelt beside his mother's chair and bowed his head. "Mama," he murmured, his voice deadly quiet. "I heard." Isabella squeezed her eyes shut, not from relief, but from heavy grief. He gripped her hand, promising he had heard enough. Marin stood glued to the window, completely forgetting how to breathe. Dominic slowly looked up at her. His eyes burned with violent rage. But it wasn't directed at Marin. Somehow, that made it far more terrifying. "Your boy is safe." The words hit Marin so hard, she grabbed the window frame just to stay upright. "What?" "Carlo is at the school," he stated. "Eli is in the principal's office. They will not release him to anyone except you or my men." "Your men," her voice spiked with a reckless edge. Fueled by pure terror, "He is a child," she snapped, "not a shipment to secure." Dominic held her stare. Other bosses would have punished that tone instantly. He barely blinked. "You are right," he replied softly. The admission stripped her defenses completely. He stood up. "You will call the boy yourself. Hear his voice, and then you will tell me every single thing Vivian did inside my house." Marin opened her mouth, but no sound escaped. Dominic glanced at his mother, then locked eyes with Marin again. "You will speak, not because I command it," he ordered, "but because I failed to see the rot spreading under my own roof. I will not fail twice." The phone call with Eli was painfully short. His tiny, confused voice echoed through the speaker, surprisingly cheerful. "Mom, a scary tall guy bought me a sandwich." Marin pressed a hand to her eyes, asking if he was okay. "Yeah," Eli chirped. "He said you were busy, and I should wait with Sister Margaret until you called." "Good. Stay right there. Do not leave with anyone else." Eli hesitated. "Is this because of the lady with the shiny earrings?" Marin's blood ran freezing cold. "What lady?" "The one who asked if I was your son yesterday. She smelled like flowers, but old ones." Marin's eyes snapped open. Dominic was watching her closely. His expression stayed carved in stone, but the air around him turned suffocatingly dark. "Eli," she warned carefully, "just listen to me. You are totally safe. I love you so much. Stay with Sister Margaret." "Okay, love you too." The line went dead. Marin lowered the phone, her hand violently shaking. Dominic reached out, catching himself just inches from her skin. That suspended touch lingered between them, like a lit match over gasoline. "Tell me," he demanded softly. So she let it all bleed out. The truth did not come out clean or brave. She confessed in fractured, gasping pieces. Vivian hiding the writing board. Vivian hissing poison into Isabella's ear. Vivian questioning if the old woman's gestures were just dementia. The black sedan. The schoolyard threats. The desperate way Isabella kept tapping her cross to warn him. All while Vivian smiled right beside him. Dominic absorbed every word without making a sound. His armor only cracked once. When Marin revealed Vivian called his mother a silent burden, he turned sharply, slamming one hand flat against the wall. For 3 seconds, he was not a mafia boss. He was a son, trying to choke down a violence that terrified even him. Isabella tapped her board twice. Dominic slowly turned around. The old woman lifted the board with trembling strain. Not Marin's fault. Dominic read the letters, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "I know." Marin dropped her gaze. "You should blame me a little," she whispered. "I lied when you asked if she was tired. She was never tired. She was purely terrified." "Yes," Dominic admitted. The word hurt. Then his tone darkened. "And Vivian knew exactly where your child waited after school." Marin fought back angry tears. "I thought if I just survived another day, I could engineer a way out. Women should never have to survive inside my house," he growled. "No," she fired back quietly, "they really shouldn't." The resulting silence felt highly combustible. Dominic stared at her, absorbing a blow that clearly hit much deeper than his mafia pride. Then Isabella tapped the board. "Tomorrow, Dominic looked at the frail woman. Yes, he agreed softly, tomorrow. Marin pieced it together and stepped back. No, Dominic turned. You want to expose Vivian at the family dinner. I want my mother to finally speak. She will come for Eli again. Marin insisted. She will never reach him. You cannot guarantee that. Dominic stepped dangerously close. Marin forced her feet to stay planted, fighting the primal instinct that warned her men like him destroy whatever they touch. He smelled of rain, expensive leather, and gun smoke. His sheer presence swallowed the room until the shadows themselves obeyed him. I know exactly what kind of woman Vivienne is now, he promised. That makes her less dangerous. No, Marin whispered, it makes her desperate. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. He told her she understood danger better than most men on his payroll. I understand, mother, she replied. And I understand women who smile while hiding knives. Dominic looked down at her trembling hands. This time he actually touched her. 2 fingers pressed against her wrist. Marin froze as he steadied the pulse that betrayed her. The touch was not romantic, not yet. It was far too controlled, too aware of what he was and everything she feared. Still, it was the very first time in years. A powerful man touched her, like she wasn't just a pawn to use or toss away. Your son is under my protection, he said. She told him she never asked for his protection. No, Dominic replied. You earned it when you protected my mother. I only did it because she deserved it. Marin said. Exactly why you earned it, he answered. Marin looked away first, hating how desperately she wanted to believe him. By dawn, the estate woke like a theater bracing for a tragedy. Florists hauled in white roses and blue hydrangeas. Caterers rushed silver trays through the service entrance. Guards double-checked the guest lists. Men in dark suits patrolled the grounds beneath umbrellas, muttering into hidden earpieces. The dining hall glittered with chandeliers, gold-rimmed plates, and enough candles to make every single lie look holy. Vivian floated through the chaos in a cream silk dress, her hair perfectly pinned. She had a smile soft enough to make fools forgive almost anything. Entering Isabella's room, she found Marin fastening the silver clasp at the matriarch's throat. Vivian's eyes caught Marin's in the mirror. How is Eli? Marin's fingers stopped for a fraction of a second. Isabella's gaze sharpened. Safe, Marin answered. Vivian's smile twitched. For now, Vivian murmured. Marin turned around. Safe, she repeated, and this time, the word was laced with steel. Vivian stood there, clever enough to sense a shift in the room, but too arrogant to care. She figured the fear would return when needed. Stepping closer, she touched Isabella's shoulder. Tonight will be beautiful. Vivian cooed. All you have to do is sit there and let your caregiver speak for you. Isabella slowly lifted one finger, tapping it once against her wheelchair. No, Vivian's eyes flashed, though her perfectly painted smile remained. Stubbornness is quite unbecoming at your age. Acting on pure instinct, Marin stepped directly between them. She needs her rest before dinner. Vivian slowly looked Marin up and down, a silent, calculated insult. You forget your place. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs. For years, that exact sentence used to crush her. Bosses said it with corporate jargon. Men said it with softer mouths. Rich women said it wrapped in expensive perfume and pity. But something shifted when Dominic intercepted that threat. Actually, no, it shifted because Marin heard herself say no, before she even knew a mob boss was listening. I know exactly my place, she fired back. Vivian's smile vanished. Marin pulled the door wide open. And it is not beneath you. For one fleeting second, Vivian looked genuinely ugly. Then heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Dominic walked in. Vivian's face transformed in an instant. Darling, she purred, reaching out. Dominic just stared at her hand until she dropped it. Inches from his sleeve, a tiny, brutal rejection. Marin saw it. Isabella saw it. Vivian knew they saw it, brushing past his fiancée. The crime boss knelt right in front of his mother. Mama, he whispered. Isabella gently touched his cheek. He closed his eyes. I should have listened to you before, he murmured. Tonight, absolutely no one speaks for you, unless you allow it. Not Marin, not me, nobody. Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she reached for her writing board. Marin set it on her lap. Her frail hand wrote slowly, boys safe. Yes, Eli is safe. Then Isabella wrote one more name, Vivian. Dominic's jaw tightened. Tonight, he promised. Vivian forced a small, hollow laugh that fooled absolutely no one. Is there some private Mafia, family drama, I should know about? Dominic stood up, his voice chillingly calm. No, you'll hear it with everyone else. By sunset, the storm had rolled back in. Heavy rain lashed the dining hall windows as guests piled inside beneath black umbrellas. The Marrow family swept in, dripping with old money arrogance. Vivian's father leaned on a silver cane he didn't even need. Her mother wore heavy pearls, while her brothers smiled like wolves finally invited indoors. On the other side, the Varelli syndicate watched them without an ounce of warmth. Every alliance here had a price tag. Every smile hid a blade. Marin walked in right beside Isabella, gripping the back of her wheelchair. The writing board rested quietly across Isabella's lap. Marin was wearing a striking dark green dress. Dominic had it delivered that afternoon. Right after catching a maid whispering that Marin's nursing uniform wasn't suitable for a syndicate dinner, she almost turned the gift down. Then Isabella tapped twice in firm approval. That dress fit her in a way she rarely allowed clothes to fit. It didn't hide her shape, it commanded respect. Soft fabric clinched at her waist, elegant sleeves, a modest neckline. Looking in the mirror earlier, she'd seen a woman who was still exhausted, still terrified, but absolutely no longer invisible. Dominic spotted her the second she walked in. The mob boss stopped dead. His dark gaze lingered. Not a long stare, but long enough. Marin felt it like physical heat across the room. Vivian caught it too, knuckles turning white around her champagne flute. Dinner kicked off with polite, wealthy lies, empty toasts to syndicate unity, family and peace. Marin stood anchored behind Isabella's chair, listening to ruthless people preach about loyalty, all waiting to exploit an old woman's silence. Dominic took the head of the table, his expression completely unreadable. Vivian sat perfectly on his right, glowing in ivory. The Varelli engagement ring flashed on her finger, a massive black diamond boxed in by white stones, an heirloom older than most blood feuds in the room. Every few minutes, Vivian shot a poisonous glare at Marin. "Remember your son," that look said. Marin met Isabella's eyes. The old woman stared right back. Near the end of dinner, Dominic stood. The room went dead silent. Heavy rain tapped the glass like impatient fingers. "My family knows exactly why we are gathered here," Dominic stated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried serious weight. "Before I marry, my mother gives her blessing. Without it, there is no wedding." Vivian beamed a flawless smile engineered for society pages and absolute fools. Leaving the head of the table, Dominic walked straight toward Isabella. Marin gripped the handles of the wheelchair. Dominic sank to his knees. "Mama," he asked, "do you bless my marriage to Vivian Morrow?" The entire Mafia brass stopped breathing. Vivian tilted her head, her cold eyes locked onto Marin. Marin's mouth went completely dry, for one agonizing second. She pictured little Eli waiting at the school gate, his blue backpack, his small face searching for her. She pictured the black car. She envisioned every brutal way this syndicate could punish a mother for speaking the truth. Then Isabella's frail, trembling hand reached up and covered hers. Warm and absolutely certain, Marin stepped forward. "Mrs. Varelli will speak for herself." A tense murmur rippled through the dining hall. Vivian laughed lightly, masking her panic. "She is just exhausted. It has been an emotional week. Marin can tell us what she means." Dominic ignored his fiancée entirely. His eyes stayed locked on Marin. No dark commands, no pressure. Just one quiet nod. "The choice is yours." Marin set the board on Isabella's lap and handed over the pen. The old woman's hand shook violently. For one agonizing second, absolutely nothing happened. Vivian pounced on the hesitation. "See, she can barely hold it." She pitched her voice to sound impossibly gentle for the crowd. "We really shouldn't humiliate her." Dominic fired back, "2 words, we wait." Dead silence reclaimed the room. Painfully, slowly, Isabella pressed the pen down. She managed a single word. "No," someone gasped. Vivian shot up so fast, her chair screeched against the marble floor. "She's completely confused." But Isabella kept writing. "No blessing." The entire dining hall erupted into frantic whispers. Vivian's face contorted. "Marin did this," she snarled. "That nurse has been dripping poison in your mother's ear. She wants power in this house." Isabella's hand moved again. "Vivian hurt me." Now Vivian's mother jumped to her feet. "This is absurd." Isabella wrote one final line. "Marin protected me." Marin felt her throat close. Vivian spun around, perfect tears already welling in her eyes. "Dominic, darling, please." She reached for him. "Your mother is sick." Marin manipulated her because she is lonely. She just wants to feel important. You know how women like her act the second they taste a little attention. Marin flinched despite herself. Dominic caught that flinch, and his expression turned to pure ice. Vivian stepped closer, getting desperate now. She hates me because I'm marrying you. She knows that once I'm your wife, she goes right back to being nothing. Dominic finally looked at her. And what exactly is she? Vivian hesitated. Too late, the trap had already snapped shut. Dominic raised one hand. Carlo stepped forward, setting a small black audio recorder on the dinner table. Vivian's face went completely white. Dominic, she whispered. The mob boss just pressed play. Vivian's own voice echoed across the dining hall. Tomorrow night, when Dominic asks for his mother's blessing, you will tell him Isabella accepts me. Marin's recorded voice answered, shaking but clear. I won't lie for you. Vivian's voice returned, dripping with venom. Unless you want your son to disappear from school tomorrow. The dining room froze. The tape kept rolling. Blue backpack, red inhaler, side gate. Children are incredibly easy to find. A woman at the table clamped a hand over her mouth. One of Vivian's brothers vaulted halfway out of his seat. Instantly, armed Varelli enforcers materialized behind him, like shadows given physical form. Vivian stared at the tiny device like it was a loaded gun pointed at her chest. Then came the final recorded sentence. You're a hired nurse with bills to pay. I am his fiancé and Isabella can't speak. Dominic clicked it off, not just quiet. Absolute, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that changes who owns a room. Vivian looked around finally, understanding her beauty had failed her. Still, she tried to survive. I was just angry, she blurted out. I didn't mean it, she said. Marin provoked her from the very beginning. Dominic kept his voice dead calm. You threatened a child. She cried that she was emotional. You abused my mother, he said. Vivian shook her head. No. No, I only wanted her to accept me. I love you, Isabella tapped her board once. No, that single. Sharp tap cut so much harder than screaming. Dominic looked at his mother, then back to Vivian. My mother heard the lie in you before I did. Vivian's tears stopped working. I only did this because I was terrified of losing you. Dominic stepped closer. You never had me. Her face crumpled completely. For one wild second, he took her hand, and she actually thought he was forgiving her. Then he slid the Varley ring off her finger. Slowly, get her out of my house. Vivian screamed. No words at first, just pure, raw rage. Her family started shouting. Heavy chairs crashed back against the floor. Morrow men reached inside their jackets, then froze. Every Varley guard in the room already had them marked. Vivian pointed straight at Marin, as Carlo and another guard grabbed her arms. You ruined everything, she spat. Marin's knees were shaking, but she refused to look away. No, she answered, louder than she felt. You did. Vivian was dragged out beneath the chandeliers she once thought would light her future. When the doors shut, the room did not recover. It completely fractured. Guests whispered. Morrow relatives argued bitterly. Dominic's uncle demanded immediate retaliation. Someone muttered about the police, while someone else brought up blood debts. Outside, the storm slammed heavy rain against the glass, like the sea itself came to watch the collapse. Dominic ignored every single one of them. He knelt before Isabella right in the center of the hall, right in front of family, rivals, servants, and enemies. The most feared man in Newport took his mother's hands and bowed his head. Forgive me, he whispered. Isabella just stared at him for a long time. Then she lifted one trembling hand and touched his cheek. Tap, tap, yes, Dominic closed his eyes. Marin looked away. Some moments were just too intimate for a crowded room. Later that night, after the guests were cleared out and the Morrow family was escorted beyond the gates under heavy guard, Marin found Dominic in the dark corridor outside Isabella's room. His tie was loose, the jacket was gone. That tightly controlled mask finally showed some cracks. She is asleep, Marin told him quietly. He just nodded. Eli is with Rosa in the guest suite. He ate 3 pieces of cake, she said, and asked if Mafia mansions always served dessert during emergencies. For the first time all night, Dominic almost smiled. Then he looked at Marin. You were brave. She leaned back against the wall, tired enough to finally be honest. No, I was completely terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear, he said. That sounds like something powerful men say, after women like me take all the risk. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Dominic stared at her, and Marin braced herself for the fallout. Instead, he just lowered his eyes. You are right. That answer unsettled her way, more than his anger ever would have. Men like him were not supposed to admit when a woman in a borrowed dress told the truth. What happens now? She asked him to Vivian. To all of us. His gaze drifted toward Isabella's closed door. The Meros will deny whatever they can, and then they will retaliate. Marin's stomach tied into a knot. So it is not over. No, she almost laughed out loud. Of course it wasn't over. In fairy tales, the villain gets dragged away, and the house is perfectly safe by morning. In real life, cruelty has cousins, business contracts, bank accounts, and men with guns. Dominic looked right back at her. Your son stays protected. He is not joining your world. She fired back. No, I mean it. So do I. Marin studied him. Zero softness in his face now. No romantic promise, no easy comfort. Just a dangerous man, making a decision the rest of the world would be forced to respect. That really should have frightened her, and honestly it did. But beneath that fear, something else shifted, a strange, reluctant kind of trust. The retaliation came exactly 3 days later. Not at the sprawling mansion, but at the edge of town, out on a narrow coastal road, where Marin's car stalled beneath a dead gray sky. She had insisted on driving herself to Eli's school. Dominic assigned a discreet escort anyway. Marin was furious about it right, until the first SUV appeared in her rearview mirror, and a second one blocked the road ahead. Men stepped out, not Varley men, Morrow men. The rain had stopped, but the damp air smelled heavily of ocean salt and engine oil. Marin locked her doors with badly shaking fingers. Eli was not in the car, thank God. Her phone lit up. Dominic, she answered, with trembling hands. Do not hang up, he ordered. How did you know? Your escort stopped responding. A man approached her window, casually tapping the glass with a gun. Marin's breath caught. Dominic's voice dropped low. Marin, I am here, look at me. What? Not at him, at the rearview mirror. She looked far behind the Marrow SUV. Headlights suddenly pierced through the heavy mist. Black, fast, so many of them. Dominic's voice stayed chillingly calm. Unlock nothing, say nothing. When I tell you, get down. The man outside her window started shouting. Marin couldn't hear the words over her own racing pulse. Then Dominic gave the order. Now she dropped hard. The entire world exploded into motion. Engines roared, doors slammed. Men shouted while tires screamed against the wet pavement. Something heavy struck the glass, but it didn't shatter. Marin curled tight into the footwell, hands clamped over her head, breathing like a woman desperately trying to keep her soul inside her body. Then her door was ripped open. She screamed and swung blindly. A strong hand caught her wrist. Marin, it was Dominic. She looked up. He stood right there in the open doorway. Rain mist silvered the shoulders of his black coat. His eyes were completely wild for the first time since she met him. Not with rage, with fear. You are safe, he told her. She just stared at him, shaking way too hard to even answer. His intense gaze swept over her face, her shoulders, her hands. He checked her for injuries with a controlled panic that betrayed his feelings more than any confession ever could. Then he reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Dominic lifted her out of that car, like she weighed absolutely nothing. Her whole life, people had made her feel like she was too much, too big, too heavy, too inconvenient, just too hard to love, but in his arms. For one dangerous second, she felt none of that, she just felt held. And honestly, that frightened her way more than the armed men on the road. He carried her straight to his SUV, while his guards handled the bloody aftermath behind them. Marin did not look back once. She had zero desire to see the real cost of being protected by a man like Dominic Varley. Inside the warm SUV, he wrapped his heavy coat around her shoulders. You disobeyed me, he muttered. Her laugh came out ragged and broken. I am sorry. Was I supposed to thank you for assigning secret guards? Yes. Despite everything, she almost smiled. But then her face just crumpled. Dominic moved closer, then forced himself to stop. That restraint is what finally undid her. I hate this, she whispered. I hate your violent world. I hate that Eli needs bodyguards. I hate that your enemies know my name. I know, he said, and I hate that I feel safer when you are near me. Dominic went completely still. The rain began falling again, softly tapping against the roof. Marin wished she could take those words back. Dominic's voice dropped lower when he finally answered. You should not feel safe. I know I am not a safe man. No, she agreed, looking at him through her tears. But you are becoming safe to me. That is the real problem. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Dominic reached out. He brushed a single tear from her cheek with his thumb. Not possessive, not claiming her. Almost reverent. Marin, he whispered. Her name sounded incredibly dangerous in his mouth, just because of how gently he said it. Suddenly, the driver's door opened. The fragile moment shattered. Dominic pulled back first. But after that day on the road, everything shifted, not quickly, and definitely not simply. Marin wasn't going to fall into his arms just because he rescued her. She was way too smart for that, too tired, too deeply protective of Eli. And Dominic certainly didn't become soft overnight. He remained feared, controlled, ruthlessly violent whenever his world required it, dead silent when rival men begged him for answers. But around Marin, that silence started to change. He began arriving earlier to Isabella's room, and staying much longer after he finally learned the taps. He practiced the signs, badly at first, then better. He sat patiently while Isabella spelled things out, instead of making Marin translate. The first time Isabella answered him directly, and he understood without help. The old woman smiled. Dominic looked like that smile physically hurt him. Marin quickly looked away. Some tenderness felt too private to witness Eli. Meanwhile, decided Dominic was probably a vampire, just a very polite one. Dominic accepted this wild assessment without any argument. "Do you own the ocean?" Eli asked one morning over pancakes in the mansion kitchen. "No, do you want to? No, do Mafia bosses ever eat cereal?" "What kind?" Dominic paused just a little too long. Eli pointed his fork right at him. "You really don't know, do you?" Marin laughed before she could stop herself. Dominic looked over at her. That sound completely changed his face. Not into softness, into a raw hunger he immediately tried to hide. Marin stopped laughing. Her pulse certainly didn't. Winter soon settled over Newport, bringing dead gray skies and white breath fogging up the windows. The estate, once as cold as a museum, began warming up in small ways. Isabella's boards were carefully placed in every single room. The staff learned basic signs. Anyone who dared speak over her was instantly dismissed. Anyone who moved her board was gone before sunset. Marin stayed, not because Dominic asked her to. She stayed because Isabella took her hand one night, tapped twice and wrote, "Stay if you choose. Not if you are afraid" choice. That one word had become the center of everything. Dominic offered her a brand new position as Isabella's personal advocate, not a servant. Her pay tripled. Eli's private school was fully secured. His expensive asthma medicine was covered, and a guard always watched them from a safe distance. Never close enough to make him feel trapped. Maureen agreed, but on her terms. "My son doesn't become a Varelli prop. He goes to normal school. He doesn't learn to fear ordinary life." Dominic's eyes actually softened. He told her that might be the smartest rule ever spoken in that house, and she wasn't done. "I don't answer to men who think money makes them God." "Then you'll have trouble with half my relatives," he warned. She told him she already did. He almost smiled. Their love started right there, built on arguments, sharp boundaries, and near touches that stopped just in time. Like the night Dominic stood outside her small guest cottage in the pouring rain. She'd woken up shaking from a nightmare, but he refused to step inside until she opened the door herself. She told him he could come in. He said he knew, "So why are you still outside?" "Because if I walk in every time I want to." He said, "You'll never know, if it's still your choice." Marin just stared. Rain dripped off his heavy black coat. His dark hair was soaked. The most dangerous man in Rhode Island stood on her porch like a sinner waiting for salvation. She opened the door wider. "Then come in, because I choose it." And he did. He didn't touch her. He sat across the kitchen table until dawn broke, while Eli slept nearby, and the ocean smashed against the cliffs below. They talked about Isabella, about Eli, about grief. They talked about the crushing exhaustion of carrying everyone else, and still feeling like you failed the ones who matter most. Dominic shared exactly one detail about the attack that stole Isabella's voice. He said it happened because he trusted someone who smiled too easily. Marin understood. She asked if Vivian reminded him of that. Yes, and what did Vivian remind him of? His eyes lifted. That guilt makes men blind. Marin's hand twitched. She wanted to reach for him. She held back. Not yet. A week later, Dominic watched another man make her laugh. Just a harmless moment. Carlo had brought Eli a toy ship, joking dryly about Dominic's total inability to wear anything but black. Marin laughed. Carlo joined in. Then Dominic walked into the room. Dead stop. The temperature plummeted. Marin felt the shift in his jaw instantly. Carlo felt it too, suddenly remembering he had to be literally anywhere else. Once he vanished, Marin crossed her arms. "Don't do that." Dominic met her gaze. "Do what?" Make your own men terrified just because I laughed. His jaw tightened. He admitted he didn't enjoy it. Her laugh, or Carlo's comfort with it. That honesty should have pissed her off. It did. But it also woke up something dangerous inside her. You do not own my laughter. No, he said, and the word clearly cost him. He stepped in close, stopping inches away. But I want to be the reason for it. Marin couldn't breathe. Dominic's eyes dropped to her mouth for one heavy, suspended second. The sprawling estate. The armed guards, the mob war, it all just dissolved. Then Eli yelled from the hallway. Mom, Isabella says my spelling is criminal. Marin jumped back. Dominic turned away, exhaling hard. Your kid has timing, Dominic muttered. She joked that he got it from her. No, Dominic murmured, you would have shown mercy. By early spring, the Morrow threat was entirely neutralized. Publicly, it looked like routine business shifts. A few port inspections, sudden resignations. A boring financial scandal, some quiet arrests. The Morrow family lost the deep roots they tried to steal through marriage. Vivian fled the country under circumstances absolutely nobody discussed around Marin. Dominic gave her exactly one guarantee: she can never reach you. Marin believed him completely. Not because he was a gentleman, he wasn't. That was the brutal contradiction she had to swallow. Dominic's violence wasn't romantic. It wasn't something to admire. But his restraint, that mattered. His raw honesty mattered. He never asked her to pretend the Mafia world was clean. He only asked if she could stand beside him, knowing he'd spend his dying breath keeping that dirt off Eli's hands. She kept him waiting a long time for an answer, and Dominic just waited. That patience made her love him more than anything. The ultimate test came in the grand dining hall. Isabella demanded a Friday evening dinner there, almost 5 months after Vivian's exile. Marin felt it was a disaster waiting to happen. Dominic thought it was even worse. Eli thought any room filled with haunted rich people candles was an absolute no-go. Isabella just tapped her board once. No, so dinner happened. This wasn't an engagement party, not a Mafia alliance, just family. Isabella wore a deep blue dress. Eli sat beside her looking dead serious, having fully appointed himself as her personal translator. Rosa brought way too much food. Dominic took the head of the table, but that massive chair didn't make him look quite so lonely anymore. Marin sat right across from him. Every time their eyes locked, she looked away first, right around dessert. Isabella slapped her palm flat against the wood. The room froze. She pointed to her writing board. Marin slid it over, but Isabella shoved the pen toward Dominic first. He frowned. Mama, she tapped twice, pointed to the empty chair beside him, then pointed straight at Marin. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs. Isabella, she whispered. The old woman ignored her entirely. Gripping the pen, her hand moved slow, but far steadier than the night of the attack. I want my son to marry Marin. If Marin chooses him freely. The entire room stopped breathing. Eli's eyes went wide. Rosa practically crossed herself in the corner. Dominic stayed frozen. His eyes locked on those words for a long, heavy moment before he looked up. Mama, Isabella just wrote again. Not servant, not debt, family. Marin's face flushed hot. She could barely speak. Dominic stood up slowly. He kept his distance, and that space between them almost broke her. Marin, he said, his voice quiet. You do not have to answer anything tonight. Tears pricked her eyes. Of course he'd say the exact thing that made running impossible. For years, men had demanded answers from her. They wanted commitments, sacrifice, blind gratitude. They wanted smaller needs, a smaller life, a completely shrunken version of who she was. Dominic was giving her room to breathe. Isabella shoved the board toward Marin. She had written another line right underneath. My son needs a woman who tells him the truth. Marin needs a man who will never ask her to abandon her child. Eli looked up. Mom, he whispered. Is Nona Isabella asking if Don Dominic can be my dad? The tension snapped. Marin slapped a hand over her mouth. Half laugh, half sob. Dominic turned to Eli. For the first time since Marin had met him, the terrifying Dominic Varelli looked genuinely afraid of a 9-year-old's verdict. Only if your mother wanted that, Dominic said, and only if you did, too. Eli chewed on this with total gravity. Would I have to wear black? No. Would Mom still be allowed to correct you when you read wrong? She already does. Would Nona Isabella live with us? Isabella tapped twice, hitting the board so hard it jumped. Yes. Eli nodded slowly like a mob boss closing a contract. Then maybe it's okay. The whole table laughed through their tears. Dominic's eyes found Marin's. No commands, zero arrogance. No heavy expectations, just a boss feared by the entire East Coast, standing before the only woman whose yes he refused to take by force. "I won't pretend I deserve you just because my mother says I do," he told her. "I won't pretend my world is clean. It isn't. I have enemies. I have blood on my hands. I carry a name that terrifies people." Marin's tears finally spilled over. Dominic held her gaze. "But I know this much. I don't want you because you saved my mother. I don't want you because of some debt. I want you because when the rest of the world saw silence, you heard a woman when others saw a servant. You fought like a mother. I saw power, and you showed me consequence. You saw my mother, you saw Eli, and somehow when I deserved it least. You saw me." Marin couldn't blink. Then his voice dropped. "If one day not out of gratitude, or fear, or my mother's wishes, but because you choose it. If you can ever imagine a life beside me, I will spend the rest of mine, proving you and your son will never stand alone again." Dead silence. Even the candle flames stopped moving. Marin looked over at Isabella, a woman who lost her voice, but never her iron will. She looked at Eli, the boy she had chosen over every easy escape route, and then she looked at Dominic, a lethal man who finally understood that love, without listening, was just another kind of arrogance. "I spent years rejecting any love that forced me to sacrifice my son," she said. Dominic fired back instantly. "I would never ask that. And I won't enter this mansion as a charity case. Never, and I will not be owned." His eyes went pitch black. "Nobody owns you," she swallowed hard. "If I say yes, it comes with truth. With Eli, with Isabella, no hidden secrets locked out of reach." Dominic stepped closer, slow enough that she could easily push him away. "She didn't. Then say yes only if you actually want me," he murmured. Marin's hand shook. Isabella watched, tears spilling down her cheeks. Eli slipped his small fingers into his mother's hand. Marin took one deep, jagged breath. "Then not one day," she whispered. Tonight, Dominic's entire face shifted. Not a look of victory, just pure disbelief. A tenderness so completely raw, it physically hurt to witness. "Marin, yes," she breathed out slowly. "Honestly, yes." Isabella tapped her board twice. Again and again. She kept hitting it until the whole table broke into wet laughter. Dominic took Marin's hand like a man holding something holy, not a boss claiming a debt. He lifted her knuckles and kissed them softly. Eli just groaned. "Do I really have to watch this?" Isabella tapped once. "No." She pointed straight at his chocolate cake instead. He happily shoved a fork in. Months later, Marin married Dominic in the sprawling gardens behind the Varelli estate. The Atlantic shined bright blue past the cliffs. No fake mob allies. No hungry crime families sizing up the marble columns. No woman in ivory pretending love meant possession. Just a tight circle of trust. And Rosa sobbing loudly into a handkerchief. Carlo stood guard, furiously blinking back tears. Eli clutched Isabella's writing board like a sacred artifact. Isabella herself wore dark blue. That silver cross at her throat caught the glare of the sun. The officiant asked for their blessing. She lifted the board. Her hand shook, but the letters were deliberate. "Family protects your voice when the city tries to choke it." Dominic stared at the floor. Marin just squeezed Eli's hand. Isabella tapped the plastic twice. A hard yes. That was how Marin Hayes, the plus-size nurse hired to shield a broken woman, finally carved out her own space. The crosshairs never left their backs. The syndicate never suddenly grew a conscience. Trauma did not magically wash away. They survived strictly because a voiceless mother refused to stay completely powerless. A terrified outsider chose hard truth over a safe escape. A little boy taught hardened killers about real guts. And a mafia boss finally learned that the strongest force in his empire never needed to shout. Vivian Morrow had confused a closed mouth with a weak mind. Huge mistake. That silence had been taking notes all along. Every mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, he may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The Mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The Mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, but what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful, because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves. But it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, Truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.